Up a day. It's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson, and welcome to another edition of the Innovate Guam podcast where we look at all things innovation, technology, and improvement related to the island of Guam. Like, subscribe, and follow me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and now on Substack. My podcast drop the beginning of each week. Also, look for my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News the first and third Fridays of each month. Now, everybody, today's episode is a little bit off script, but I think we're going to have an exciting podcast discussion today. We're dropping this episode outside of our usual schedule to respond to the recent U.S. airstrikes against Iran. What makes this especially relevant for us here today is, how does the island of Guam play a quiet and diversionary kind of role in this recent attack plan? And in today's episode, we'll go behind the scenes of what it takes to do a B-2 stealth bomber global strike mission and tie that to the continual bomber rotational presence here on Guam. So with that, I'd like to introduce my guest for today. My guest for today's podcast is a retired Air Force colonel and command bomber pilot. He has flown the T-37, T-38, B-52, and B-2 stealth bomber aircraft. He was the former 36 Operations Group Commander at Andersen Air Force Base, Guam from 2015 to 2017. He has a bachelor's degree in aeronautical engineering from the United States Air Force Academy, a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Cal State Fresno, and a master's degree in systems engineering from the Air Force Institute of Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you my brother, my classmate, and one of my best friends, Samuel G. White III. Sam, what's up, man?
What's up in half a day, Rob J? Love you, brother. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Well, we're excited. We really want to pick your brain and get insight into what it's like to fly the B-2 stealth bomber and how those global strike missions are actually conducted and executed. Before we get into the meat of that, I have three icebreaker questions. This is kind of a tradition we have on the Innovate Guam podcast, but I've tailored these questions to you and your background. So you ready to get into it?
Let's get it rolling, man.
All right, here's the first question. What's your definition of innovation and what does innovation mean to you?
When I was thinking about this last night, the typical response is out of the box thinking. Right. That was like the boilerplate statement for innovation for a long time. But to me personally, it reminds me of that the confidence course. You remember the confidence course that we did back at the academy? They would give you like a brick, a rope, and a horseshoe or something like that. And they told you to solve a task with your team, given those elements. And so to me, that's what innovation is. So given the tools that you have access to and you know how to operate, solve a particular problem. We all have wishes and desires. I wish I had the technology to do X, and I wish I had the logistics or the supply or the talent to do Y, but we don't always have access to that. So innovation to me is given what you have in your hands or have access to, how are you able to solve a given problem?
Yeah, perfect point. I love that definition. So as a bomber pilot, what is your favorite innovation or piece of technology that was used to upgrade the U.S. bomber aircraft fleet?
So you might find this is funny. This funny because it has nothing to do with direct lethality, nothing to do with a bomb or anything like that. Because of the duration of our missions, communication is very, very important. A lot of times, if we're in an actual war, we're taking off before the air tasking order is even dropped. So before they develop the list of targets that they want us to hit, we're already airborne headed to where we're going because we're so far away from the fight. So communication is a very important thing. for Kosovo in 1999 when this airplane was first used, and then later again in Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, we did not have a very good long-range communication system for data. It was very archaic. Think nuclear war type of stuff. So the ability to load your missions was very, very time-consuming and fraught with a lot of risk of making an error because it was very manual. So innovation, not me, but a lot of my peers in the kind of the ramp up to Iraqi freedom decided to pair a PRC 117 radio, which is a secure and encrypted, for those of you who don't know, that Special Forces typically uses.
Prick 117 Special Forces radio.
Yep. Took that radio, hooked it up to just a regular laptop, and was able to establish a secure satellite data link with the bombers. And so for Iraqi freedom, we would be flying to our targets and we would get emailed, just like Outlook email, our targets. You've got targets. And so, you know, and it wasn't just the targets. They could now send you the imagery. They could send you what the threat picture looks like, you know, what your support assets, all that stuff could just literally be emailed to you. And we just did that on our own because Northrop at the time did not have the time or the capacity to do that. So we just strapped that to the airplane, and that's what enabled those sorties to be so successful. 5 years later, Northrop was able to put a direct capability to do that function, you know, inherent to the airplane. But in the interim, that's what we used. And that was probably the greatest example of innovation that I could think of on the bomber.
That's a great example of innovation. Great one. So, third question, you know, what inspired you to pursue a career in high-tech aerospace and become a pilot?
I don't know if it was out of inspiration or just necessity, because I was not smart in anything but math. I was really good in math and I was terrible at everything else. So I don't know if I really had any options. So my dad is an engineer. And so that sort of, I had a really good mentor, and kind of he led by example. And I was just naturally attracted to that. Aviation in particular, me and him, for as long as I could remember, used to go to the airport and watch airplanes take off and land. And then later, when I was in junior high school, we'd go to air shows and I'd watch them kind of fly around. And frankly, when I saw that, I saw a young dude with his freaking flight suit on and sunglasses, and saw him flying around. I think it was like in an F4, you know, the zipper suited sun god. And then, you know, and then when he lands, he's standing out in front of his jet and all these girls are all over him. And I was like, dude, so this is your job? All you do is fly around and then, you know, girls are hollering at you? And he's like, yeah, this is what I do. And I was like, that's for me. And so the marriage of those two, tech and airplanes, kind of became my passion. That's the only thing I've really ever wanted to do for as long as I can remember. So yeah, that's how I got it.
How awesome.
Yeah.
How awesome.
It was a blessing. It was definitely a blessing.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, as your best friend since 17 years old, it's amazing to have had a front row seat and watch you from knucklehead and 17-year-old to now, you know, where you are right now and all of this experience under your belt. So it's interesting and wonderful to see that.
We're coming up on our 38th year anniversary. We met on 12 July 1987.
Oh my goodness, you pulled out the date. Do you have flowers for me or what?
Yeah, they're in the back.
All right. So let's talk about the recent airstrikes against Iran. You know, talk to me from an operational standpoint. What do you think of you know, those latest airstrikes with the stealth bomber against Iran?
We practice these missions. We practiced them,
Yes.
and not, you know, obviously not over Iran, but we practiced very kind of ways we were going to get the required number of airplanes in the small airspace with its support assets all together. And it was fascinating. I've practiced one of those missions actually from Guam, where we went from Guam to the range that we were going to practice at, met up with a whole bunch of other people, and then I flew all the way back. And so we practiced not just the tactics involved, but the durations involved. And so it gives me a warm fuzzy. You know, aside, you know, there's a lot of politics and, well, what if and what if that, but
Yeah.
the fact that, and this is extremely difficult target set. We were trying to kill those targets with a lot of different kind of scenarios. And that again, that involved a lot of practice. And so the culmination of that and the deception plan and marrying all the assets that had to happen together and the actual bomb itself, I mean, that's freaking amazing. That's America.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty amazing. So let's talk about capabilities of the bomber. How does the B-2 Spirit leverage like stealth and precision in these type of operations in order to hit a target set like that?
Right. So the three things that a B-2 brings to the fight, stealth, precision, and also range. And so that's the special sauce that we have as the United States Air Force and the United States of America over everybody else. And so we'll start with the big one, the stealth. So it's not invisible, but it's very hard to detect, right? So we have a radar cross section that doesn't tell you that there's a 330,000-pound fully loaded bomber coming at you. Because of that, we need some support assets to kind of help us out sometimes, whether it be suppression of enemy air defenses, either kinetic or jammers that help us out. But it's not invisible, but it is, like you said, low observable. One of the reasons why we take off all the way from the United States is because that's many times is because that's where our best maintenance is, so we can make sure that we're sending pristine airplanes to whatever that target set is. We have other bases like Guam that are some almost as capable as the main operating base, but that's one of the main reasons why we like to take off from the United States. The range, the other thing that we have over other countries is we have an enormous tanker capability. So for those sorties that flew the other day, we're talking 6 to 7 refuelings. So typically you fly 6 to 7 hours and then you get gas, and then those refuelings take about 30 to 40 minutes, and then you're back waiting for your next event. And so that range enabled by nobody kicks butt without tanker gas is an enormous capability. And for that number of airplanes that they sent, I mean, that was probably 3 to 4 times the number of tankers. So just think about that number for a minute.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the last thing is precision. So, dropping a 30,000-pound bomb aided by GPS, it has to hit a specific spot. Otherwise, all bets are off, right? That target is so deeply buried that you have to hit exactly where you got to hit. Otherwise, it was all for naught. And so the accuracy of the B-2's navigation system, enabled by global positioning system and a radar system, we can enhance the targeting with our phased array radar to make sure that we're hitting exactly what we want to hit.
Wow. Impressive, and the technology that's on those flying beasts. So let's talk about it from a human standpoint. Flying missions that long and under that kind of pressure, how do you handle fatigue, sleep, food, all of those kinds of normal human kinds of things? How is that handled on a long range global strike mission like that?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked this question, 20 minutes into this conversation. Northrop didn't think about this during the 7 years that it was designing this airplane. So, they really focused on those 3 things that I mentioned, and that whole airframe is built for that. And then they're like, yeah, we got to put some people in here to control this. So they shoehorned a couple people in there, and there's only 2 seats. And so the crew comforts.
So only 2 crew members.
2 crew members. That's it. Yeah. There was a brief period of time where there was talk of a 3rd crew member, a navigator, but that quickly went away as Strategic Air Command went to Air Combat Command, and they didn't want to pay for another crew member. So, but it would have been in the same space. So that would have been tight. The crew, it's about the size, if a 767 cockpit, it's about the size of a 767 cockpit. So a guy like me can stand up fully, but if you're like 6 foot or higher, you're bending down. You can't stand up fully. This is another reason why innovation kind of comes together. There's no bed that's inherent to the airplane. And so early on, back to the days of Kosovo, and then even a better example was Afghanistan, where our classmate flew the longest combat sortie ever of 44 hours. And
Who was that?
Brian Jethro Neal. Yeah, my roommate from A Squadron for a semester.
Yeah.
So in order to get sleep, what we'll do is one person will fly and the other person will get rest. Since there's not a bed, initially somebody just bought like a lawn chair from Walmart, that's the joke, and put it behind the two seats, and that's where you got rest. That later morphed into just a one each Army cot like we used to sleep in, in Jacks Valley. It's just that, and you just have a sleeping bag. But then the challenge becomes, how do you get quality rest? Because on either end of that cot, there's either the outflow of the air conditioning system, which is very loud, or the can, where people use the restroom. Use the restroom. Yeah. So there's really no good options getting good rest. We do another one of our classmates, innovator Jason Marshall, came up with a kind of a high energy diet to kind of promote wakefulness throughout. And so we watch what we eat to make sure that we have a good diet to, one, kind of stay alert for the longest period of time possible, and kind of preventing drop and deuce, because that seems to be the gift that keeps on giving when you're airborne. And when you're there for over a day, that's not awesome.
Tell me about the facilities, because you're making it sound so primitive. Come on. You don't tell me it's not like up to airline quality standards.
It's like a camping toilet. It's like a camping toilet. Yeah, it's like a camping. Now it's a chemical toilet, so it does have chemicals on there that kind of allegedly reduced kind of the consequences of your bodily functions there. And then but there's really no privacy. There's a privacy current that's like available, but it takes like 2 days to install. So nobody really ever uses it. So when somebody's doing their business, you just sort of look out the window, common courtesy, and not doing, The other part is food. We did not have any warming device other than a hot cup that we used to have at prep school, for Cup and Noodle Club. So you could have that, which, that diet is not awesome. Later, after Iraqi freedom, I believe we finally got a microwave, but it was either something in a hot cup, and you can be pretty innovative of what you could cook in a hot cup. We had a hot cup.
Give me some examples.
So I've had people make complete meals in a hot cup, like spaghetti, fried rice. I mean, I don't know how they do it
in a hot cup.
In a hot cup, yeah. We had electronic warfare officers on the B-52 because we had a hot cup there too. We also had a stove though that had one temperature, hot as hell and off. And then, and so with those hot cups, you could do, you could boil hot dogs, you could do a lot of stuff, make chili. Most people, I would just do cold food, a bunch of sandwiches, cold pizza, that kind of thing. And we'd have a huge cooler for which to keep it in, because, you're in there for a day or more. So we don't have a refrigerator. So you'd have to have, a good ice plan to make sure that your food did not spoil, because there's nothing worse than, getting food sick, air sick, food sickness, food poisoning, watch chicken salad, halfway across, the pond. Yeah. So that was the food part of it. That has improved over time though. Like I said, now they have a microwave, still don't have a refrigerator that I know of. But the other part of that is getting along with your crew member. We used to, because, if you don't get along with somebody and you're stuck in that freaking small space for 30 plus hours, that's not going to be a great, kind of crew resource management interaction sort of situation, given the criticality of the mission that you have. And so we used to have to interview people to make sure that you weren't, can I say Jack? That you were not a person that's difficult to be around, in the cockpit, because those are very personal kind of interactions. So those are how we kind of dealt with the crew comforts that were, oddly enough, figured out after the fact.
All right. So now solve this, or dispel the myth that there is supposedly a crew rest area that's behind a panel in the cockpit of the B-2 that the experienced pilots hide from the newbies until they've proven themselves, and then they get to go to that one.
So,
Dispel or
yeah,
confirm
yeah,
the
yeah. Well, so that's also where the aliens are stored, right? Yeah, there is no the crew rest facility is the space over the entry door behind the two ejection seats, and that's it. There's no secret compartment, not that I know of. I flew it for 8 years, and then I was a test engineer on it for a year before I went to fly. But yeah, if it's there, nobody briefed me in, and or it was an after fact addition.
Okay, so that's just a story that they use to mess with the newbies, huh?
Right. Along with go turn the instrument landing system on. That's out in the middle of the field. Yeah, go turn it on.
I love it.
I will tell you what isn't a rumor is because of the length of our duration, the length of our sorties, and the diversity of where we bring people in to fly. They come from all backgrounds. They're not just bomber pilots from other places. They could be fighter pilots. They could be tanker pilots. They could be reconnaissance pilots. They could be airlift pilots. They could be anybody, which makes that community very unique. But because a lot of those pilots don't come from long range mission backgrounds, we do make them fly a 24-hour simulator mission, which is like practicing bleeding, right? That's painful. But
Right.
we do an actual mission and we go through it. It's in real time. There's no pauses. And the benefit of that too is we give them maintenance malfunctions that aren't practical in the air, and we also give them real threats to react to. So but they do practice a 24-hour simulator to kind of get them used to and in the long range bomber mentality.
Yeah, so you bring up a great point. How do you concentrate? Obviously, you're not going to hold the same level of concentration and focus the entire 30-hour mission, but at some point you get into the threat zone and you're going to have to amp up your level of focus in order to execute the mission successfully and then get out of Dodge. So how does that work? How do
Yeah.
you modulate that focus and make sure that you're ready to do that?
Yeah. And it's unique on this because it's hours to get there. Right. And so during those hours, it's not boredom, by the way, because they're giving you every iteration of the plan as you're going there. And so as you're getting these iterations of the plan, you're chair flying, starting rehearsing with your partner over there to say, okay, here's the targets as they stand now. Here's the threats involved. How are we going to navigate and negotiate this? And what assets are going to be there? And, so those 4 to 6 hours between refuelings, that's what we're talking about. But it's still relative downtime. Those refuelings can be pretty challenging though too. So every 4 to 6 hours, you have to amp up because it could be night, poor weather, a lot of things. You have to have your precise flying. You could be fatigued because you've been airborne so long, and that's just as important on the way back as it is on the way there. And so
Yes.
moderating your periods of go-ness is important. What I didn't mention also how we manage fatigue and energy is, we have the go pills like a lot of people use. And so a lot of times you wait.
And what are go pills?
It makes you very alert. And we're not the only people who use those, but those help manage your wakefulness. A lot of people wait to use those until you're like, target area type of thing, not just the whole time, because it's hard to be amped up that long, because then you have a hell of a crash on the way back down. But then when you get to the target area, to me, it was just like playing sports and starting a game. You do the fence in. That's kind of our place where we're now in go mode. You fence in, and now it's about to get on. You get dressed, you get all your stuff on, your survival vest, and now it's about to get real. And then it's almost like I ran track. It was almost like you start the gun, and then you just hyper focus on your task at hand. And you practice this so often. I mean, we practice it. I mean, what else would you be doing, right? But we practice these missions so many times that it's like second nature. The practice is in my experience, has been always harder than the actual event. And so you go and you do it, and you're like, oh wow, that was and it played out just the way I saw it in my mind. And then you leave, and then the hardest part for me was that adrenaline letdown after you fence out. You're out of country now, and you're like, whew, okay, now we've only got 15 hours to get back. And so you're like, dude, and there's nothing really to talk about because there's no mission updates. There's no, there's nothing to keep your mind active like it was going over. It's just 4 to 6 hours between refueling. So that was, to me, the tougher part is the return to base. And there's like, oh, wow, I wonder if we hit them. I wonder what's next. I wonder when the Chiefs are playing. I mean, there's nothing else really. There's nothing else really to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I remember a interesting story, maybe, of an in-flight aerial refueling during Iraqi freedom that you had. Do you want to share that?
So, well, actually, it was a series of in-flight refuelings. And so we were number 2 of a 2-ship. My squadron commander was flight lead. And we take off, and we were supposed to get topped off. We were taking off out of Diego Garcia, and we were supposed to get topped off as soon as about an hour after we took off from Diego. And so as soon as we take off, get here on the radio, one of the tankers canceled. And so that means we only have half the fuel available. And so the result was lead was going to get all his gas. And this is what he tells us. And he's like, we got half of our onload. And lead said, well, it's up to you to figure out whether or not you're going to bomb tonight. And so we get on long range comm with the air operations center to try to line up tankers to kind of get us skipped along to get to the target area and get back. And so we arranged 2 more tankers, one pre-strike and then another post-strike to get us enough gas to get both to the target area and then back. And so the pre-strike one was okay. We ended up, both of us, lead went with us to get that gas. But again, he didn't give us enough. He didn't have enough because this was like a pop-up thing to get us all the way back home. And so the post-strike one, though, was actually over Kuwait. And so we were like 40,000+ feet. And so we had to descend from 40,000+ feet at night through all the people who were coming into Iraq, because we went first to do our strikes. And then the flow of aluminum jets that were coming in after us were coming to do their business. And so we're, coming through all those altitudes. Now we're laterally deconflicted, I hope, in order to get to our tanker. And so I end up getting the gas, at night in the loop. And so if we don't get this gas, we're going to have to land like in Jordan or somewhere else. And so that was like a pretty significant pucker factor, because then, B-2 stealth bomber, Arab country.
I bet.
Yeah, that would not be on the scale of awesomeness. That would be very low. And so that was probably more stressful than the actual bombing mission, in my mind. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Sam, leave us with anything else you think the average person would want to know about that long-range global strike mission, particularly analogous to what just happened over the weekend.
Well, again, it's our secret sauce. We've got generations of stealth aircraft. It started off with the F-117, operational, that is, moved to the B-2, now then the F-22, F-35, and now the B-21 Raider. And we've learned and innovated along the way to improve that thing. Nobody else has this capability. And as long as we have it, we have a leg up on everyone else. And so yes, we need to continue to cultivate the young people to continue to want to innovate sort of in that vein. I went to the Strategic Deterrence Coalition a couple of weeks ago, which is a bunch of military and civilian folks, both in industry, uniform bases, as well as academia, that want to keep cultivating and fostering that tech innovation type things that make things like the MOP possible, make things like the B-21 and the B-2 possible. And so that's what I would leave you with is that. The other thing I'd leave you with is, still to date, there's been more people in space than have flown the B-2. So I went to the Wing Changer Command. Ironically, the Wing Changer Command at Whiteman was last Wednesday. And so the new wing commander had a pretty good first week to his duty.
A brand new wing commander.
Yeah.
First week in the seat, we're striking Iran.
Right, right. That's how seamless
Wow.
this is, right? That, to me, that's just a testament to what we do. You and I, we did our thing. We were replaceable, though. I mean, that's good for the
Yes.
systems, and then that's what makes us great. We do our
Yes.
thing, and then we get off the stage, and the next person picks up the ball and keeps going. And so we have, I
Training
think,
and workforce development of the Air Force,
absolutely, and that
second to
needs to
none.
extend, to everything. We're going to talk about
Yes.
logistics later, but that needs to extend to that.
Yes. Absolutely. All right. So let's turn our attention more focused to this theater and Guam and Guam's role in Pacific deterrence. What are the operational advantages for deploying bombers here on Guam for the Pacific strategy and the Pacific threat? Why are bombers here in Guam?
Yeah, that's great. Great point. Bombers have been influential and important in the Indo-Pacific region since Vietnam, right?
Mm,
Linebacker 2 comes to mind,
yes.
December of 1972, where we had 103 or so bombers. That ramp was filled with bombers. And they
When you
basically,
say that ramp, what specific ramp are you talking about?
Andersen Air Force Base, all those parking stubs were filled with B-52s.
That's amazing to think
Right,
about that history.
right, right. We had more B-52s at that point than we have in our inventory today, just at Guam during that linebacker 2. And then they were at other bases, Utapao, and I can't remember where else. But anyway, it's been important since then. So that's what, 50 years, plus 50 plus years that it's been important. When I came to the bomber in 1996, Guam was influential in Operation Desert Strike, if you remember that. We sent
Yes.
B-52s that launched cruise missiles into Iraq, and then but they launched from Guam and then recovered back to Guam. And so there's several instances in our history where B-52s and bombers in particular have been important to the region. The reason we started the continuous bomber presence was back in 2003, prior to Iraqi freedom. We had to take a carrier group from the Pacific and move it over to where the hot fight was in the Arabian Sea there. And so the initial deployment, I believe, was 6 B-52s and 6 B-1s. Somebody on air staff, I know the guy, said that 6 bombers would equal 1 aircraft carrier. And so that's what birthed the continuous bomber presence mission. So you might ask, well, once that fight ended and the carrier came back, why did bombers stay there for another decade?
Right.
The answer to that is once Indo-Pacific Command, now Indo-Pacific Command, got a taste for what bombers do in their region, they were like, oh, we need to have some of that. And so we do a ton in order to assure allies and deter adversaries in that region. We have 7 bilateral treaties in the Pacific, and those are strengthened by having a U.S. military presence, specifically bombers, in the region. And Guam is the most suitable place for that. One, because of its range, if its distance, it lies on a 3rd island chain, far enough away, but close enough to hit something if we need to, right?
Yes.
And so assuring allies and deterring adversaries on Guam just makes perfect sense. From there, we would fly freedom of navigation missions. China has had its island chain, first and second island chain aspirations for probably a century or more. And they're out there showing their intentions right now. And so in order to assure our allies, both the U.S. Air Force through bomber presence, as well as the U.S. Navy do freedom of navigation missions, in the South and East China Sea, just to kind of show that, hey, this is international territory that you're dealing with. This is not, China's.
Yes.
Obviously, the Korean Peninsula has been a stalemate since 1953, and so we do operations there to assure the South Koreans that we're there for their defense and in that region. So Guam is the most logical place for all that to happen. One, it's an American territory, and although it's got logistical challenges that we're going to get to, that's like the perfect place to stage long-range bomber missions.
Okay, so let's talk about the factor of tyranny of distance and contested logistics in the Pacific theater, and how we handle that, and where Guam helps or hurts in that.
Yeah. So, long-range strike, we flew those missions to Iran and in a lot of other conflicts all the way from Missouri. So that's a good thing. But what Guam also gives, which I failed to mention, is a signal to adversaries. Hey, we're serious about this. Hey, we can strike you whenever, but hey, we're going to move people into, because that was the deception plan, right? Hey, we're going to move bombers to Guam, because that sends a signal to the adversary that he might want to rethink his life. Yeah, he wants to rethink life's decisions, because hey, they're moving them to Guam. That's a little bit closer. That reduces that tyranny of distance. But we're not operationally as impacted to the tyranny of distance as other people, because of our refueling capability, right? But logistics definitely is. Anybody who's lived on Guam for any length of time knows that that's a very fragile logistics system, and it's hard to get stuff there. Especially if you start talking about a typhoon hitting, and then your supply chain is even more impacted. And so our focus needs to be not just outfitting Guam, but also some of the surrounding areas, enabling them to get quick logistics, because everybody knows that Guam is a central hub for us, right? And so we need to be agile and not just depend on that. So in
other words, be able to disperse our forces and operate with agility and flexibility from anywhere in Micronesia.
Exactly. And that just keeps the enemy's or the adversary's decision calculus moving, which is what we want to do.
So what do you think about how to enable that? Because that's something that the military, and certainly not the Air Force, can solve on its own. It takes a collective group of folks from industry, the territorial governments, et cetera, to build that robust logistics infrastructure to enable that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think industry has to be incentivized through government involvement to make this happen. So this would have already happened if there was money involved, right? There's probably little incentive to have all this logistics infrastructure just for little old Guam, right? Who's going to use it? But as it pertains to national security, I think that infrastructure, at least the framework, should exist. And so somehow that framework needs to be incentivized. And I think if the government, the local government, was advocating for that, that might help out. And so, Guam is well known to be one of the most patriotic U.S. territories in the nation. They have the highest per capita, at least they did when I was there, service rate of any U.S. territory or state. And so, and that springs from, I still think they feel strongly about when they were liberated, in 1942. And so they are some of the most patriotic people ever. And so we need to leverage that patriotism into government to incentivize industry to say, hey, we've got a logistical problem here, and here's what's in it for you. And if that can happen, then I think with that framework, then we can make some good progress. And it shouldn't just be limited to Guam. Like I said, we need to be agile.
It should be throughout Micronesia.
Correct.
Yes. Hence why there was a joint task force, Micronesia, stood up to help synchronize the operations, the pre-planning, the agreements, and the political connections, et cetera, throughout the different islands in this region. But what you're talking about is really something that goes beyond just the political and the military. Industry has to be incentivized to fall in here to build up the logistics and support infrastructure that's needed. It's needed for a national security reason, but then it has follow-on win-win kind of benefits to it. It allows Guam to build up its workforce and not just be reliant on tourism and um, just having a military base here. It's
Right.
more about supporting the high tech maintenance, repair, overhaul, sustainment, logistics kind of
Right.
requirements that are needed here,
Right.
particularly since the ship repair facility was closed here in Guam in the mid to late 90s. You have a deficit in what you need in terms of logistics support across all services, and Guam is the answer, and not just like you said, Guam, but Guam and all the rest of the islands of Micronesia, and that requires incentives and an investment in this area of the world.
Let me pile onto that too. And it doesn't necessarily have to just be a military incentive. It could be for natural disasters. I mean, think about how long it takes
Yes.
our islands to recover because we lack the logistics support in order to fix things. When Dolphin came through, when I was the commander, right before I was commander, we had 3 of our 4 instrument landing systems that were damaged, that they were unserviceable. We didn't get them fixed for 2 years. It took 2 years to get those fixed.
2 years?
Yeah, yeah, 2
The
years.
ILS at Andersen was down?
Well, 3 of them. We still had 1. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. But that's, I mean, that's in any other base that'd be unsat, right? My control
Yes.
tower was needed to be replaced. And I had all these congressional delegations to come visit, and I said, hey, so everybody knows on Guam, everything you got to add a factor of whatever. I can't remember the number is, but it's going to cost more to build anything there, right? Because you got to ship in stuff like concrete or whatever. And so for me to get a new control tower built, I pushed a piece of paper with that number on there. Like, that's crazy. A control tower doesn't cost that here. In Salt Lake, it only costs this. And I'm like, well, in Salt Lake, they got a cement plant right down the street. We don't
Yeah.
have that here. So, but I still need it. And so so the bottom line is I did not do a full replacement of the tower like I wanted. I did a within budget, Band-Aid fix to just kick the noodle down the road. But we have to get away from that. And so if we incentivize industry to help us maybe reduce that price tag, and they have other ways to make money, then that would be extremely helpful.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I tell you, it's so important, and it's a win-win all the way around for the people of Guam, for the government of Guam, for our national security, et cetera. Some serious and deliberate planning and investment into the logistics and support infrastructure of Guam and the rest of Micronesia to help enable the plans that we need to be able to execute uh, in support of national security aims. Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Hey, so is there any other examples from your time as 36th Operations Group Commander you'd like to share about Guam and challenges or accomplishments or getting people off outside of the gate to understand the importance of the mission inside the gate?
Yeah, Guam has because again of its location, it offers an awesome training opportunity. I told you we rehearse a lot of things for operational reasons, and Guam is a great place to rehearse because you have a lot of room to operate, right? And so I would like the people of Guam to know is we use that. So you'll see we have 2 big missions or 2 big exercises, Valiant Shield, and I can't remember the other one. But
North.
yeah, Cope North. Thank you. The Air Force one. Of course, I forget the Air Force one and remember the joint one. But so those exercises offer a great opportunity for not just other services, but our allies to get to work together. And that's not something that you can do everywhere, again, because of the expanse that we have the opportunity. One of the challenges, though, is we don't have the great range assets that we would have like in the United States. And that's things like threat replicators or practice bombing ranges, that kind of thing. And so that was one of the things that I tried to do, and long range communication capability. So, they practice so far away from Guam proper, it was hard to communicate with people via line of sight. And so if we
Right.
had long range communication capability, which would be good for other things.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I wish that there was more appetite to bring those kind of high tech things on Guam so that we can really leverage the geographic advantage of having Guam as a training location. Yeah.
Yes. 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 Um, as you know, that's kind of the underlying theme of this podcast, Innovate Guam, that, we see this vision of Guam having the potential to be a 21st century tech and innovation hub. And me personally, I believe it starts with investments in the sustainment and support infrastructure for the military forces that are already here, because there's a need for it. It's not a made up kind of thing just to benefit the people of Guam. It's a real requirement that if we make these investments, it would generate good paying jobs for the people of Guam, but it would solve a national security issue. And by building up that tech enabled workforce, then they could then cross pollinate into other kinds of commercial applications. And with the geography of Guam right between Asia and America, we could take advantage of the both areas in terms of commercial ability once you build up that high-tech workforce that's already supporting all of these different potential defense to support sustainment, maintenance, repair, and overhaul kinds of activities. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, it's if and hopefully the citizens of Guam realize, if they only knew how important that, like, the U.S. Air Force views their role in keeping the Indo-Pacific region safe, they should be extremely proud, and they should take that pride and do the exact same things that you're talking about and advocate for those capabilities. You know what I mean? Because that's going to be their face. That's going to be part of that, that logistics innovation. That's what we would hope, right? Because that's just going to be here
Yes.
or be there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. So, Sam, as a wrap up kind of thing, what do you want to leave the people with about anything? B-2 global strike missions, uh, bomber rotation on Guam, Guam's play in the overall Pacific theater, anything.
Well, I'm glad you're doing this. So thank you for doing this, because I've spent a lot of time on Guam. I've been going to Guam since I would look back at my logbook since 1997, and so before I was stationed there from 15 to 17, I'd been there like 7, 8, or 9 times through different deployments, missions. I was part of the building of the B-2 ops building, or the design of it. The design of that building. And so Guam, as it pertains to bomber operations, has been near and dear to my heart for decades. And so what I just hope that it continues to grow as our technology grows. I don't want the technology to outgrow Guam's ability to receive it. So things like the B-20,
Yes.
the B-21 coming on. We don't want to get to a place where we don't have hangars that can support that, or whatever's next, right? And so Guam just continues to need, because its strategic importance will not diminish. It is where it is, right? And I don't see those threats that we're facing from either the Russians or the Chinese or the North Koreans going away anytime soon. And so unless the Earth changes and becomes flat or something different, Guam will always be important. So it needs to continue to match technology so we can continue to support military operations.
Hence the theme of the podcast, Innovate Guam. Guam has to continue to innovate to keep up so that we can be relevant, because our U.S. national security interests are so tied to it. So,
Totally agree with that, man.
did a great job of summing that up. I tell you, Sam, awesome insights. This was a great conversation, as I knew it would be. Your wealth of information. Thank you for taking us on that inside look about what it looks like to do a long-range global strike mission, uh, um, and reflect on, the recent airstrikes from this weekend. For my audience, I hope you learned something today. Um, watch for my broadcast dropping. Usually it drops at the very beginning of the week, but this episode here, because it was out of cycle and unique to respond to the current events, it will be dropping mid to late this week, and looking forward to getting that out and for you all to enjoy it. In the meanwhile, follow me on all social media platforms, including now Substack. And don't forget to read my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News. And that drops the first and third Fridays of every month. So until next time, see you. And remember, no matter whether you're at work, at play, or at home, always innovate. Thanks so much.